The doctor's giving an opera performance for the crew. "Oh, come on, Tuvok, it's not that bad. See, that's better. Oh, wait, it's his Shagger season and he's apparently decided to have a meltdown in the mess hall rather than meditate. That seems dodgy to me, so we're probably in a holodeck simulation." A spray thrown from Paris to the doctor fixes things, and he lets Tuvok fall to the floor as the crew applauds and throw flowers. Calls from B'Elanna, the real one that is, bring him out of his daydream and back to reality. I suppose you could argue that the Doctor's fantasies still technically count as a simulation, so I'll give myself half a point for suggesting it was the holodeck. B'Elanna's here to let him know he won't be needed for an away mission he was scheduled to go on. He's disappointed by the news as he wanted to engage in some photography, though I'm not sure expressing a desire to treat it as a holiday is the best choice to change her mind. She offers to take some snaps for him, which is an improvement from the time she smashed his camera in the last season, but he declines. I suspect he just wanted the excuse to get out of sickbay for a while. Maybe if Janeway had given him those quarters 2.5 seasons back, he wouldn't be quite so restless. Up on the bridge, we found an orange space cloud. Bit odd as it appeared out of nowhere, but space clouds are 10 a penny, so perhaps we just weren't paying attention. And here's another distraction, a formal complaint from the doc. He thinks he's being taken for granted, treated rudely, and not accepted as a member of the crew. He's not wrong on any of those, to be fair, but the final part where he requests to be made captain in an emergency might be a bit much. As it's formal, rules dictate he should get a formal response. Chakotay's left in charge, while Janeway ponders a diplomatic method of telling the doc to go fuck himself. While she does that, we zoom into the orange cloud and find a ship. Onto the ship we go, where we discover that Voyager's being watched by someone with a thumb for a face. Indeed, the ship is crewed by more of the pound shop Sontarans, one of whom comes over and demands to know why the first is watching Voyager. He said the risk was too great as they know nothing about it, and their scans couldn't get through. Are we dealing with simple observers, or something a bit more nefarious? The first thumbface explains he may have found a way to scan them, and as he receives derision from his supervisor, says he's already requested permission from their bosses. Those bosses seem to agree, much to the frustration of the supervisor, who buggers off in a huff. We're in a briefing for that away mission. All standard stuff, which is perhaps why B'Elanna is running her foot up the doctor's leg. Any doubt that we're watching the doc daydream again is shot down when both Seven and Janeway also make passes at him. The threat of a full-on catfight is neutralized by the real Janeway dragging him out of his fantasy so she can talk to him about these grievances of his. He wants to be allowed to expand his skill set like any other crew member, and Janeway herself even admits the Emergency Command Hologram idea of his has some merit. Unfortunately, it would also take months of work, and she doesn't want that time investment taken from other, more important tasks, like looking at space rocks or looking at other, slightly different space rocks. She'll raise it as an idea for Starfleet to investigate, once they get back, in a couple of decades. A dejected doctor walks along a corridor and into a cargo bay or holodeck, the doors are the same, I can't tell which, where he's greeted by a crowd. They're toasting his promotion to Emergency Command Hologram, so we're back in bullshit land. Indeed, his tablet has turned into champagne, presumably to use as a prop given his complete lack of stomach. The celebration is being watched by the thumb faces, the method of observation apparently having tapped into the Doctor's fantasies. Original Thumbface knows he's accessed a hologram, but believes the images to be a real-time feed rather than a daydream. At least that's what he's telling his supervisor. By watching the doc, he's already learned the name of the ship and that we're all alone out here, meaning easy pickings. But he also believes he's learned that the doc is now capable of commanding the ship, as well as being all-round great and amazing. The feed cuts off every now and again, presumably the points where the doc isn't daydreaming, but original Thumbface thinks a little more observation should give them full technical details for the ship. Whether they'll be accurate or not is another matter. We're on the bridge observing the away team B'Elanna organised. You know, the one the doc was uninvited from. Just as well as the Delta Flyer reports a mayday and goes down, and now the Borg have turned up too. Tuvok's been infected with minibots and so has Chakotay. Some kabooms knocked Janeway out, and as Kim's been Borgified too, it's up to the doc to take command. An order to the computer gives him a new jacket and some pips, and full control of Voyager, obviously. A bit of banter with the Borg battle bollock, followed by single-handedly disabling Chakotay and Tuvok, leaves a curiously unaffected Seven swooning. Captain Doc orders something called the photonic cannon brought online and fires it, proper fucking up the Borg. All of this is watched by the thumb faces before the feed cuts out again as the Doc is dragged out of his daydream. Original Thumbface reports to his supervisor that Voyager's captain has been disabled and replaced with the Doc, but that they still shouldn't be attacked directly because they just murderized a whole Borg ship with a single shot. Looks like the Thumbfaces are privateers looking for a target. Just because Voyager is armed with a super mega weapon doesn't mean they can't take it on, they'll just have to be a bit more cautious about it. Original Thumbface recommends a stealth assault and their bosses agree. I suspect the supervisor made a note of exactly who all this data is coming from too, just in case. He seems like the sort of manager who knows how to take credit and deflect blame. As the Doc's leaving the bridge, he's stopped by Chakotay. He prepares for the inevitable bollocking for letting his mind wander, but instead receives compliments. You know, about blowing up the Borg. A query with the computer confirms that Chakotay is not standing in front of him, so it's time to admit something's gone fucky. To be fair to him, instead of trying to hide it, he goes straight to the others and admits he's been cocking around with his program. Again. This makes 3, and both of the previous times were a complete shit show too. He tells the group that he tried to give himself the ability to daydream. He's certainly been successful, but no longer has control of when he can turn it on or off. Case in point, B'Elanna and Seven start arguing about who should get to help him, then Kim tells us that the warp core is going to kaboom unless someone can go inside and stop it. Naturally, the experience would kill any meatbags, so only the Doc can do it. Back in reality, the others drag a ranting Doc away from the warp core before he can eject it. He's gone full fantasy mode now, living entirely within his imagination. B'Elanna's managed to channel those fantasies onto the holodeck where we can view them, and, to her credit, Janeway questions the morality of this. Viewing a person's inner thoughts is a breach of privacy, and the Doc's already concerned that he's seen as lesser. B'Elanna explains that this is a chance to diagnose the problem and repair him. Besides, it's not like they'll all treat it as some sort of voyeuristic jaunt into his brain. We're on the holodeck, indulging in a voyeuristic jaunt into the Doc's brain. After a quick ogle at Seven, something half of the crew would be guilty of, the environment morphs to the bridge. Kim's openly treating the Doc's fantasies as entertainment because Harry Kim is a dick. The Doc's imagination regularly focuses on saving Voyager, and B'Elanna believes that might make those thoughts the best candidate for tracking down how to stop this. Another switch of fantasy to a scene with imaginary B'Elanna declaring her affection is enough to convince the real one it's time to leave and start work. Janeway's the last one to the door, meaning she's the only one to catch the scene of him thanking imaginary Janeway for giving him the chance to better serve the crew of Voyager. The image seems to affect her, though I bet she still doesn't give him his own sodding quarters. The crew of Voyager weren't the only ones rummaging through the Doc's innermost thoughts. Original Thumbface was watching them too, and from the looks of him, has figured out that he's fucked up. When his supervisor arrives, he tries to backtrack on his original assessment, suggesting that maybe Voyager isn't worth the hassle after all. Tough shit, buddy, ships are already on the way. This is happening, and if the data he gave isn't 100% accurate, the blame will land squarely on him. Janeway's checking up on the Doc. B'Elanna worked late to fix him, which is either a pragmatic engineering priority or an example of her usually hidden compassion, depending on your point of view. Either way, he's been patched up and apologizes to Janeway for dicking with his program. She smooths over the topic, saying she understands the desire, but asks him to refrain from doing so again until they can make it safe. That choice may not be his. Some fiddling about with tubes is interrupted by the sound of a party and the appearance of a champagne flute. We're back in a fantasy, much to the Doc's distress, but this one's a bit different. Original Thumbface is here too, you see, and he's explaining to the Doc that this daydream is being caused by him. Oh, and Voyager is going to be attacked, with the Doc being the only person who can stop it. He's dismissive, of course. Another chance to save the ship? That's clearly bollocks. But Original Thumbface's open admission that this experience is not real gives him cause to listen to the rest. He explains his situation to the Doc and how there's going to be an attack in about an hour. He's willing to help us prevent it, partly because his fuck-up will be revealed if the ship is taken, and partly because he's come to admire the Doc's desire to expand beyond his original role. Despite that sounding precisely like the sort of ego inflation present in his other fantasies, the Doc's willing to give him a chance. To the bridge. The doc's warning that we're about to be attacked is received as well as you'd expect. He's brought proof, though, and using data from original Thumbface, we're able to see 3 ships sneaking up on us. The doc explains that his contact will help us stop the attack, but only in exchange for hiding his fuck-up, which means that when things kick off, the doc needs to be the one in the captain's chair. Original Thumbface might not be able to keep his side of the bargain. His supervisor's skeptical about the accuracy of their data and decides to upgrade their attack. The doc returns to the bridge in his new uniform and takes the chair. He's not alone, as Janeway has been patched into his program from Astrometrics, meaning she can communicate with him in private and remain in command. Original Thumbface gives them a call to let the doc know that everything's turned to shit. The new attack plan means he won't be able to help them, so they're on their own. The attack comes, and after an opening shot to let us know they're serious, Thumbface supervisor calls with demands. Tuvok manages to get a shot off as the doc stalls them, and their response is to destroy our weapons. Janeway thinks it's time to negotiate, but the doc ignores her. He's decided that if things are already terrible, you've got nothing to lose from piling on the bullshit. He orders Tuvok to charge the photonic cannon, the imaginary weapon we saw destroy a Borg tactical testicle in a single shot in his fantasy. Original Thumbface's faux panic is infectious, and his supervisor requests instructions from their bosses. Based on the new data, their bosses decide that all this is no longer worth the risk. The ships scarp her as the doc takes another turn in the captain's chair. Just as well he's holographic, or the fabric would need dry cleaning. The doctor's changed uniforms again and is back in sickbay until a call from Seven brings him up to the mess hall. They're holding a surprise party for him, which is pretty inconsiderate when you think of the negative associations he must have with them now. Regardless, Janeway pins a medal on him for how well he handled himself when in charge. She's also reconsidered his request for command functionality and has organised a project to look into it. Maybe we'll see him wear pips again, maybe she's just blowing smoke up his arse. Seven gives him a congratulatory kiss on the cheek, then clarifies that her intentions were platonic, and we leave them to their celebration as we fly away. The Doctor's desire for acceptance, for equality, is not a new topic on Voyager. For each step forward the crew makes, there seems to be a contrasting step back. The most egregious of these is Janeway's unwillingness to give the Doc his own quarters. He requested some over 2 years ago, and even with the addition of the Equinox Quintet, we've still got ample to spare based on crew losses. We see another example of that inequality in this episode when B'Elanna tells the Doc he should be offline when not in use. We saw that before in the episode Gravity, but those circumstances related specifically to the power supply in his mobile emitter. You could argue the same applies when on Voyager, but that same assumption is not levelled at the biological crew. There's no expectation for them to be in stasis when not on shift, so they use less food, oxygen, and heat. And their replicator rations are not limited to essentials. Kim can choose to fabricate a clarinet, but the Doc isn't allowed a room they already have? Do fuck off. That difference in expectations is one of the primary reasons that the Doc isn't the equal of the other crew. They're allowed to spend their spare time indulging in activities or learning skills. Hell, they even let Kim take over the captain's chair occasionally, and he's not even a proper character, let alone a proper officer. The other crew have downtime. The Doc has shutdown time. Again, it's the expectation that if it isn't productive for the rest of the crew, his activity should be curtailed. A biological chief medical officer wouldn't be expected to accept that, but the Doc is treated differently. Janeway knows this, of course. She doesn't say, "I've given you freedom." She says, "I've given you a great deal of freedom. A definitive amount of it. A finite quantity." The cage is larger, but it's still there. That makes what comes later all the more poignant. In one of the fantasies Janeway watches after the others have left, the Doc explains that his motivation for growth was the well-being of those around him, or, in his words, to help the people he loves. In her defense, this is another example of Janeway being willing to reconsider her own position. Her examination of the legal situation surrounding holographic command officers wasn't necessary as the matter had been laid to rest, but she did it anyway. The same could be said of the ending. The kindest review you could give of the Doc's time in charge is that it wasn't a complete disaster, but she still decided he deserves the chance to experience more of it. That tendency towards introspection is perhaps the main attribute of Janeway that I'll remember when Voyager is all said and done. We live in a world where we're told that a U-turn is always a bad thing, regardless of whether the initial direction would have carried us over a cliff. Seeing a main character, especially one in a command position, be willing to re-evaluate their stance is a delightfully refreshing display of humility. End of episode.
Okay, so the first thing we gotta do is turn off the holodeck safeties. What does that?
Historically, literally anything. Power surge. Glitch. Sherlock Holmes novel. Cardassian spy. The mortality failsafe will turn off for whatever amuses the god running the holodeck.
You what?
The god in charge of the holodeck safeties. They are controlled by the Roman god Mercury, or the Greek god Hermes, or the Egyptian god Thoth. Basically the god of dickheads. If he thinks it'll be funny, he'll turn them off.
Hold on, there's a god in charge of the holodeck safeties.
Of course there is. You don't think that keeps breaking down by accident, do you?
So, if we can make it funny, we can kill Paris?
Yes.
Well, that's us fucked then, based on the quality of the writing in these sketches. Woof.